And good morning. Thank you very much. Wonderful, wonderful. Always a wonderful reception from you folks. Thank you very much. It's Dr. Roddenberry coming to you live from Willow Springs, North Carolina on a Thursday morning at 10 a.m. Good morning, Nicole Cochran. Good morning, John Barris. Tell your wife that I love every time she comes into class, John. She is one of my favorites, so definitely I like her in this class. Who else we got in the class today? I noticed we got 6 people. Ronique, are you in here yet? Anybody else in the classroom? Excuse me, I got my coffee going. Got my favorite Asheville Tourist baseball t-shirt. Hi, Ty. Good to see you. Thanks for coming. It's always great to have you in class. I like to collect minor league baseball shirts, so wherever I go, if it's the Portland Sea Dogs or the Asheville Tourists, wherever, I love to get the Savannah Bananas. I love to get their t-shirts. Kaylee is here. Fantastic. Okay, Kaylee, how are you doing? Thanks. That was kind of odd and weird. I'm glad she's here, though. Okay, so shall we go ahead and get started with today's lecture? Before we get started, remember this is week 8, busy, busy, busy week. So your week 8 homework is due tomorrow night. The time on my laptop's like 18 minutes past. Oh, ha, ha, ha. That's funny you should mention that. It's a backdrop. Bloop, bloop. I could be anywhere. So, yeah, I took this picture months ago. My office doesn't even look like this anymore. I've changed it around. It looks different. Don't forget, you have the week 8 homework, which is due tomorrow night by 5 o'clock. The other thing is, you have a discussion board due tonight at 11:59 p.m. If you did the webinar last week, you've already taken care of that requirement. However, if you want the extra credit or you didn't come to the webinar, you need to do that tonight by 11:59 p.m. Don't forget, week 8 homework is due tomorrow night by 11:59 p.m. Now, your second exam is going to become available tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. and is going to be due this Sunday night at 11:59 p.m. So that's 3 due dates this week. Discussion board tonight, homework tomorrow night, exam 2 on Sunday night. So make sure you're on top of things for class this week. Okay? To help you, I will be having an exam review tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. on YouTube. I am going to go over the test in as specific a detail as I possibly can to guide your studying and to make sure that you do as well on this exam as possible. Any questions before we get started with the lecture? Yeah, Friday, June 4th. Yeah, wonder when I took that picture, right? So let's go ahead and get started. So remember, we're still on chapter 8. We're now talking about early childhood, right? So first we have infancy, then we have early childhood. So we started with prenatal development, 10 months before you're born. Then we did infancy from birth to about 2 years. That's the infancy period. And then we're talking now about early childhood from 2 to 5 years of age. Now, the reason I mentioned this earlier in the semester, you may not have truly appreciated it, but when we talked about breaking people into developmental periods, these developmental periods are not so much biologically determined as they are a social construction. We just break them up we break the study of human beings up into these groups because these seem like useful break points. So from the time you're born till the time you can walk and talk seems like a useful grouping of kids. Now we're talking about that second grouping of kids, which is from the time they can walk and talk to when they're actually ready to go to formal school. That's what early childhood is. When we talk about middle childhood, we're talking about school till puberty. And that's another grouping of people. And so each one of these groupings is useful as a study tool because it allows us to look at children who are going through the same things as each other, but different challenges that at different age groups. And if you think about it, the challenges of toddlerhood are definitely different than the challenges and the tasks of early childhood. So that's where we're at right now, early childhood. Now, we're talking about socio-emotional development this week. So we're talking about that personality development. And remember, the child's basically just started thinking about themselves as an object. Their descriptions of themselves is very similar. Very concrete, very simplistic, very positive, very devoid of social context, right? Children at this age, their thinking is not very logical. They're symbolic, but they don't do good at a lot of Piagetian tasks, and there are a lot of limitations in their executive functioning. So children, in a sense, you can tell where we're at with these kids right now. And in fact, next week for chapter 10 homework, I might actually have you characterize the changes that occur broadly across these dimensions. So I want you to scale back for a little bit and think about how children are developing, right? So from 0 to 2, they're not logical. They don't really have symbolic abilities. They're not even really sure of themselves as an object. That's the 0 to 2. Now we've got these kids who are not logical, but their ability to think about things as objects. And they themselves are this positive object that's devoid of real logical comparisons and social comparisons. Now, at this point, during this age, one of the most important things that we're trying to develop with children is emotional control. Emotional control. So the first 2 years of your life is all about your child's comfort, making them feel comfortable so they feel secure around you. As soon as that happens, now we're at 2 years of age, we are trying to help our children learn to understand their emotions and control their emotions. This is very important in the developmental process. And this is where a lot of parents miss the boat. They haven't really focused on helping their children learn how to control their emotions. Yes, toddlers throw tantrums, but they need to learn to not throw tantrums. So it's up to you, the parent, to do the emotional coaching. And so we talked all about that in week 8. Now, we're going to talk a little bit more about the practical concerns during this age. And so all of you are working students, so you know exactly what I'm talking about when I'm talking about balancing acts and trying to keep more than one thing going at one time. I'm sure some of you are not only working in school-going parents, but you are working in school-going people, but I'll bet some of you also have children as well. So that means you're balancing school, you're balancing work, and you're balancing childcare all at the same time. You are short of time. I know exactly where you're coming from. You have too many things to do and not enough time. So things are going to have to start giving. When when you go back to work, things that have to give are things that are related to your child care. Oh, give me a break. Hold on. Go away, loser. Hold on, folks. I'm going to hide user on this channel. Remove. Okay, I am sorry. Jesus. I apologize for that. You know, that's the unfortunate side effect of being a D-list YouTube star with 370 followers. I've now attracted the attention of the pornographers. Okay, excuse me, where were we? We were talking about the balancing act. So, back in my day, I grew up in the early to mid 70s was when I was in my formative years, and there were still a good number of moms that were stay-at-home moms with the dad going to work and bringing home the bacon and the mom cooking and doing laundry and whatnot. That was starting to change even in my days in the 70s. But before that, that's how it always worked. Now, you folks know here in the 21st century, it is impossible to survive unless both people are working, or at least unless one of the parents is making a ton of money. So we know that everybody's in the workforce. You know, statistics are going to suggest that more than 1 out of every 2 U.S. mothers with a child under the age of 5 is in the workplace. Over half of us are having to go back to work while our kids are still really, really young. Did any of you were any of you able to stay home during the first 5 years of your kid's life? I don't know if we have any stay-at-home parents here that were able to do that. And you know, typically, I hate to say it, a lot of times, okay, Ty, very good. So you were able to stay home. That's good. That takes a lot of pressure off. Now, the thing is, if both parents are working, then you've got to share the domestic duties. And as it turns out, in a lot of American households, the guys don't hold up their bargain as well at home as they do in the workplace, which leads a lot of the domestic work to fall on the moms as well as working 40 hours. So what you're going to see is that more working mothers than working fathers report difficulties with work-life balance. So if that's you and you're a dad out there, make sure you help with the laundry, cook some meals, and make sure you're taking care of all of the stuff you can, because it's really difficult when all of this stuff, the domestic and the job duties, fall on the working mother, right? Now, what you're going to find is that when dads aren't working, when dads are unemployed, you would think, hey, that's cool. We have a parent at home to look out for the kids. It turns out, for some reason, and I'm not sure if this is because of the stress it impacts on the men who are experiencing it, who are unemployed. Maybe there are some emotional things going on up there. Maybe it sets a bad model for the children. Maybe it's because the male maybe typically earns more money in households than the female does. But recent research has shown that unemployed fathers really affects children's health. And you know, that might be who carries insurance on the family as well. And so the father being unemployed is really kind of an important point too. And what you're going to find is that when the mom works, though, the children, and especially the girls, are going to engage in less gender stereotyping. So actually, in my opinion, that's one of the advantages of having the mom in the workplace, is that the female sees a model of somebody who's out there achieving. And so the female doesn't fall back on stereotypes about being helpless and being taken care of. Good morning to you, Ronique. Okay. Katie Bauer, I'm sorry, Katie, I just saw your mention. You actually stayed home because daycare would have been more than I could make. You know, that's the other sad thing that us parents with children in daycare know. Daycare is insanely expensive, and that's even for just the run-of-the-mill average ones, let alone the one that's special or provides some sort of academic enhancement. If you want to go to one that's sort of maybe a Spanish academy too and teach your child to be bilingual, man, or one that's a Montessori, you are really going to pay a ton of money in daycare costs. I'm going to send my child back home. What do you mean? Back to the islands or home from daycare to your house, Roni? That's kind of a vague, and potentially the daycare is a kill. Oh, I know. It is an absolute killer. I remember when, my parents watched my kids until my oldest son was 3 and my younger son was 20 months. And then my parents said, sorry, we can't do it anymore. And I had to put both of my kids in daycare. And it was the hardest thing to carry financially for the next 3 years. And when your kid finally goes to school, That's the thing. That's going to influence your decision of whether or not to send your kid to school. You don't want to pay that extra year of daycare. But if you have a boy, especially, and the boy is not ready verbally or emotionally, you might want to think about spending that extra year on daycare money or finding alternate plans. Some people, because daycare is so expensive, they'll get that boy that's maybe on the borderline. Maybe he's a month past the deadline to go into kindergarten, so he potentially could go into kindergarten. But you have to make sure that your child, especially your boy, is ready if you're going to push him in that year early. My dad, Kaylee says her dad was a stay-at-home dad while my mom worked because daycare is so expensive. Right. And that's the thing. There are going to be less stereotypical families. So we are going to have men that stay home and do the daycare. Now, I would say it was probably different. Your father wasn't an unemployed father like this statistic down here shows. So, and I think probably now that I'm thinking about it, unemployed fathers maybe don't have a choice, and maybe they were the ones carrying the insurance. I think if it's a choice made like that, then you're probably not going to have the negative health outcomes that you would typically see. And so that's interesting that your family was flexible enough to do that, Kaylee. It turns out being an online psych professor is not the hardest job ever. And my wife's a hotel manager, which is a very hard, time-consuming job. So I was sort of Mr. Mom here for my kids, taking them to and from school. I was in carpool every day. I did the doctor's office when we had to do it. I did the dentist's appointments. I washed the clothes and cooked the dinner. And so my kids had that Mr. Mom experience as well, Kaylee. Was your dad a good cook? I did not have daycare and graduated at 17. What did you mean? You did not have daycare as a kid, or you didn't have daycare? What do you mean? You mean you were not brought up with daycare? He was decent, not the best though. Okay, it's all right. Does he know how to wash clothes? Was he good at that too? Look at this guy's father of the year. We're gonna have to give. Oh, okay. Huh. That's interesting. What kind of daycare did you have? You stayed at home, John? That's interesting. I will say the one weird thing. No, let's see, where is it? Boom. One of the craziest things, this is just one guy's opinion up here on my soapbox. Being a stay-at-home dad like I was, and maybe Kaylee's dad could attest to this, when I took my kids out to the playground, I was sort of ostracized because the moms at the playground, they kind of have their little society, and it's hard to fit in as a male. And you definitely can't go to a playground as a male, an adult male, if you don't have kids. But it's still kind of creepy even if you do have kids. So I would go there and I would have to sit by myself, and my two sons would play because we didn't really interact with any of the mothers on the playground, because a stay-at-home father was kind of a wild bird. So that was kind of weird. Ronnie graduated at 18 as well. Your dad worked a lot. Help children learn. My dad had similar experiences taking us to the playground as well. Yeah, it's just kind of weird that way. I'm sorry, I spent way too much time on this one slide. Now, hopefully it has changed a lot, Katie. I hope so. Let's talk a little bit about divorce. Your book has a section on divorce, which is the dissolution, of course, of the family unit. I was never unlucky enough to go through that. My parents stayed married until they died. My wife, on the other hand, her mom unfortunately went through 2 divorces during her childhood. Both of my parents were the children of divorce. So I've seen a lot of families with divorce. In fact, both of my parents were divorced before they got married and had me. So I have half brothers and half sisters who've all gone through divorce. And you might ask the question, is it better to stay in a marriage rather than to get divorced? Does divorce harm the kids, and does it harm them more than staying in a bad marriage? And I would say that research suggests that if it's a really bad, contentious marriage with a lot of arguments, the negatives of being divorced are not as bad as the peace that comes from breaking up this contentious, argumentative style relationship, especially if it gets explosive and potentially physical. On the other hand, the research does suggest that in general, just as a universal, your outcomes for children of divorced families are, as a general rule, not going to be as good as the outcomes for children that come from families that don't go through divorce. So, unfortunately, the answer is probably yes. However, I would say if it's a contentious, argumentative, potentially explosive, and violent relationship, uh, again, this is me on my soapbox. It's probably better to end that relationship. However, the research would suggest that the divorce does hurt the children. I grew up seeing an unhealthy relationship between my parents, and I wish that I'd been able to divorce. To what healthy relationship looks like. Exactly. Katie brings up the good point. If it's a really bad relationship where the child is learning unhealthy relationship behaviors, if there's explosiveness, if there's lack of respect, if there's screaming and yelling and violence, those relationships, it's probably better if they are dissolved. But again, that's me saying that you should get divorced, and I don't want to say that as a point of fact. But the research would suggest that sometimes when you dissolve this family, the stresses that go along with it can have their own impacts of a bad relationship. Right. Okay. So I guess we all would agree that if it's a really bad relationship, maybe it's so divorce is not as good as a good growing up in a home with a good marriage. How about that? Children of divorced families show poor adjustment, more serious emotional problems than their counterparts in never divorced families. Again, there are variations and it depends upon how bad the marriage was. But your children, in these families, when you split up a family, there's sometimes going to be a little more acting out of these children. They may get into trouble, not necessarily bad trouble, but there's going to be a little bit of acting out. And you're going to see maybe some internalizing problems, so anxiety and depression. Typically, when clinical psychologists talk about problems, they talk about externalizing and internalizing problem. Whenever you act out, like a schizophrenic acts out, a person with Tourette's acts out, they have what we would call externalizing problems. People who are sociopaths that steal and lie and rob, that's an externalizing problem. Internalizing problems are when the problems occur inside in the privacy of your own head. When you're thinking and depressed and anxious and nervous and fearful, those are all inside your head. And so what you're going to see is that children of divorced families, sometimes there's going to be a little more acting out, and sometimes there's going to be more negative emotions to go along with these divorces. Splitting up the family, switching between schools, having parents that may have different beliefs on how important school are, may relate, and the fact that you're going through the stress of the divorce may lead to more academic problems. And you're going to see a small uptick in the children who drop out. Okay? And the families and divorced families, you're going to see, and this Kaylee and Katie, both of y'all bring up the idea of being in bad family situations. Children of divorced families may have lower self-esteem and have less competent, intimate relationships. But is that because of the divorce, or is that because of the problems that led to the divorce? Right, Kaylee? Right, Katie? Maybe these problems were caused by the negative relationship and just manifest themselves after the relationship ends. So we can't say it's a causal thing, but you are going to see that the children in divorced families are going to have, some more problems. Exactly, Katie. Correlation versus causation. So was it caused by the divorce, or was it caused by the bad relationship that led to the divorce? We don't know. But these are just the things that you will see. Now, in families, there should be conflict between your parents. Your parents should have disagreement. But your book talks about the difference between good conflict, which is where your parents discuss things. They may have different opinions, but they discuss them rationally, without emotion, and without resorting to insults, violence, aggressive behavior, and demeaning kinds of acts. On the other hand, you're going to see that so my parents were always disagreeing about different things. But you know what? They were never calling each other names. They were never screaming and yelling. But mom and dad were always disagreeing and having short spats on what they wanted to do, what was right, what we should do. But we're going to differentiate that from the bad conflict that you'll see in some families, where you're going to have parental disagreements that involve hostile emotional displays, destructive behavior, screaming, personal attacks. And that's never a good thing. And one of the things that I just want to say to you as couples, as potential couples, as parents, do not ever demean your partner. You can say that your partner's wrong, but if you're calling your partner stupid, ignorant, if you're using names like that, again, if you're using names like that, if you're getting personal, this is a sign of real relationship problems, and you need to think about what you're doing in this relationship. Those are very, very unhealthy things to do in a relationship. You can disagree with your partner, you can argue with them all you want, but don't ever cuss them or call them names. When you get to that point in a relationship, things can become irretrievably broken, right? Now, and what you're going to see is that this interpersonal hostility between parents is really going to affect your children. Even if you're not screaming at your children, they're going to see this screaming and anger and hatred towards somebody you are supposed to care about, you're supposed to take care of, and it's going to cause problems in your children. Your book even talks about this thing, emotional security theory. So really, yes, your child has a relationship with you, but one of the things that really gives them a strong clue as to how secure they are as your child is how you treat somebody else you are supposedly attached to. So if you are screaming and having conflict and threatening to leave your partner, that your child is going to use that, evaluate that in terms of how secure they are in their attachment to you. If you hate mom like that, or you hate dad like that, maybe you hate me like that, right? And what you're going to see, and I just stuck this chart in because it's in your textbook, you're going to see that, the divorce is in separation of families is much greater here in the United States than it is in a ton of other developed countries. And look at that. You're going to see 23% of our households have single parent households, compared to 6% for Japan. Now, I'm not saying that these countries are right. I'm not saying that these countries aren't sexist. Maybe they're forcing people to stay married and making women stay married when they shouldn't. All I want you to know is that there are more single parent households here in the United States than you'll see in other countries. Okay, so let's go along. Now, how many of you were spanked growing up? How many of you have ever been spanked? It's a culture thing. I know a lot of cultures, religion are against divorce. Exactly right. And so when your culture's against it, but you're sort of being forced to stay married. And I don't want anybody to feel like they're forced one way or the other. Okay, Ronique got spanked. Katie got spanked. Present. Hear me. Of course, Kaylee says, wow, we all got spanked growing up. Most of us are from the South, I would imagine. We got whooped in the South. Ronique, you're from, you said you're from the Caribbean. And so I'll bet you your parents didn't mess around with the whooping either. Okay, do we think spanking is bad or good? John Bears from New York. You got whooped in New York? Wow, so they spank in the in the north as well. You know, I got spanked at school a couple of times in elementary. Now, I would say I richly deserved it, but it's still kind of a crazy thing to think that your principal, a stranger, could take a paddle to your butt at school. I got paddled 2 or 3 times between third and fifth grade. I broke that Okay, you broke that generational habit. So, how many of you are going to spank your kids? Anybody else? So Katie's not going to do that. I did it a couple of times, and I wish I hadn't. And as my boys got older, I made some aggressive statements towards my teenage boys, which I wish I hadn't. Through my desk with me in it. Wow, wow, that's not a little bit out of control. We'll talk about that. Okay, now, here's the deal. This is where I'm going to. Why, sir? Why, sir? What? I'm not sure what you're asking. Why, sir? Who you're referring to? Rephrase that. You get it. Why do I regret it? That's a good question. I Ty gives her Vegemite if she acts up. That's funny. I've heard Vegemite tastes really nasty. My mom has expressed regret for the spanking because my mother caught her lying about my grades. Wow. Wow. Okay. Huh. Interesting. I'm reading the comments here. You folks are really blowing me up with the crazy stuff that's happened. Here's the deal, Ronique, because I felt like I was out of control and emotional when I did it. I felt like a lot of times it was more me getting my frustration out. And in retrospect, I think I could have instituted control. Uh, without getting that way. I think I embarrassed myself sometimes, and I let it get out of control. Once I started getting angry, I was a great father in terms of not getting angry until my kids were probably started actually, 5 or 6, 7. When they started playing sports, I started getting more emotional, and I let my emotions get out of the way. Um, um, that's the only reason. Now, here's the deal. I still, Ronique, I still am a strong believer in control. I still believe children need to learn no. And I tell you, both of my boys are really controlled people. And they both controlled their behavior, and they know what no is, and they didn't get into a lot of trouble. But just the times that I got violent or aggressive were not my best times. Um, but I think it is debatable for learning. Sometimes just telling a kid something isn't enough for them to listen. There have to be consequences. Yes. How do you cope when surrounded by a culture that believes in spanking? Right. You know, I think one of the things that you can do as an adult with a 2-year old is that you are a lot bigger than that child. So when you want a child to do something, you can make them do it. And when you don't want a child, you can remove them from the situation. Your child wants candy. No, you don't get candy. I'm bigger than you. It's bedtime. I'm going to put you in the bed, and I'm going to tell you that you have to stay in the bed. You come out of the bed, you go back in the bed, you go back in the bed. I think you can be firm and strong enough without resorting to aggressiveness. I sort of think about it, Ronique. Uh, it is showing control, but I found myself getting more emotional. It became more about me and my emotion than what I was trying to teach. Let me give you an example. One of the things that I've found is that there are teachers who don't feel confident about their teaching ability, and these teachers are very punitive and angry towards students. And when you miss an assignment, you ever notice how a teacher will tell you how it was your fault for missing the homework? Of course, I'm not going to give you a makeup. It's your fault. You knew there was a deadline. You should have done this. Have you ever had a teacher when you asked them for a break and they just tell you why you screwed up and you're not going to get the break? Have you ever had a teacher demean you like that? I'll bet you have had. And the thing is, you wind up focusing on how you feel rather than the behavior that you shouldn't have done. All right. So, what I have found is that teachers who get angry and are unloading their emotion, they're not helping the situation. I can tell you, no, you can't make the test up without telling you why you made the mistake. Right? Nope, I'm sorry. I just don't allow people to turn in exams late. Boom, I can stop it right there. That's control. And then telling you why you made a mistake and how this is your fault and you are wrong just adds emotion to the control. Do you see the difference? So, what I find is that whenever I'm saying something negative like that to a student, I didn't need that. I could have just controlled the behavior without adding the negative emotion. It's demeaning. And so, Ronique, what I found is that I, as a grown man with 3-year-old boys, I could control them without getting emotional about that. I could use the tone of my voice. I could use my persona, and I could control the boys without, and I taught them no at an early age. And so it wasn't necessary to resort to aggressive behavior. So I felt like that was just a failure. People, I think, often differentiate between strict and violently aggressive. And I think, unfortunately, for me, maybe not for you, but for me, whenever I went to a spanking, I was letting my emotions come into it rather than controlling the behavior. I was letting my emotions. God, you probably don't believe that. And those of you who are going to spank your children, that's completely fine. But for me, it became more about me being emotional and about how I felt rather than controlling my kids. Now, one of the things that this book is not written by, this book is written by psychologists a lot of times. And, academics do have literal points of view. And, there are more conventional people that believe in what if you say because of the spanking your boys understanding what time it is? Uh, you know, uh, right. It's okay, so you can do it once. But I think if you haven't established control by the age of 2 or 3 or 4, then you've wasted time. It's interesting. Ronique should mention that. Here's the deal. I spanked my kid a couple times when he was 13 months old, and this fixed his problem forever. Here's what I did. When your child starts walking around, they need to understand no. That's a safety word. They need to understand no. Don't walk out in that street. No, don't touch that. No, don't grab that. Unfortunately, they need to understand and respond to no. So when my child was 13, I did this right in front of my wife. She absolutely freaked out. My kid had gone over there and he was going to play with the outlet, the little electrical outlet that you plug things with. And kids, the number one killer of kids our age is accidents. And playing with an electrical outlet is a dangerous thing. So my child went over there and I decided this is the time I'm going to teach him no. I said, CJ, no. I said that very firmly. I said it twice. He didn't stop. I then said, CJ, I'm going to count to 3 and then I'm going to spank you. All right. I said that very firmly. And then I did this. I said 1, 2, 3. I counted that quickly. And he hadn't stopped. I then went over there and I grabbed him by the back of his shirt and I held him up to where he was a little uncomfortable and I gave him a spanking on his, he was wearing diapers. And it made a loud sound, but it didn't hurt him. And I said, no, 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 no. And he started crying like you wouldn't believe. He freaked him out, okay? And my wife got really mad because she thought I was being abusive. Now, the next day, we were together and with my child and my wife, and he went over to the electrical outlet again. And I said, CJ, no, He didn't stop. I said, I'm going to say no, and I'm going to count to 3, and then I'm going to spank you. He didn't stop. I said, 1, 2, 3, and I jumped over there and I spanked him again. No, 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 no. He freaked out and he cried, and my wife again was angry at me. The next day, my son CJ starts crawling over there, and I say, CJ, no. He doesn't stop. I say, I'm going to count to 3. I said 1, and as soon as I started counting, he stopped and came back to me. I didn't have to spank him. And then after a few days, all I had to say was, CJ, I'm going to count. I didn't even have to stop counting. I just had to tell him I was going to count. And then after a while, all I had to say was no, because he knew that after no was I'll count. And after counting, I'm going to count. And when I get to 3, I don't care if you run to Alaska, I'm going to come there and spank you. So he learned this contingency. And in 3 days, when he was about 12 months old, both of my boys, I taught them the word no. And then after that, I did not spank them again. Like I said, I started getting a kind of yelly and screamy as a baseball dad when they got into athletic sports. And that got my aggressive juices flowing. I can't say, I don't remember ever spanking. I think I spanked my older son when he got caught cheating on a test in middle school. And I spanked him, and he looked at me like I was crazy, and I felt like the worst father ever. Okay? Okay? Exactly, exactly. See, that's the thing. The aggression, sometimes it creates these negative emotions in the kid. So if you spank your kid, now I'm saying, like I said, I did a little spanking. I'm not proud of it. But the research by these professors, and you can do with it as you will, is that they typically say that punishment, spanking your kids, can be associated with higher behavioral problems. Is it because the kid's bad to begin with, or does the spanking make them bad? Who knows? It leads to higher levels of aggression as children and adolescents. Are they aggressive because they've been spanked, or are they spanked because they've been aggressive? Nobody knows. It suggests that they're going to have a higher incidence of intimate partner violence as adults. Now, were they aggressive to begin with and they were going to be aggressive as adults, or did the spanking cause them to become aggressive to their romantic partners? Nobody really knows. Now, it does create a certain amount of fear of the parent. My boys are afraid of me. Now, it says best to handle misbehavior by reasoning with the child and explaining consequences. Let's be honest, you can't reason with a 2 or 3-year-old. You can tell them why something's happening, but are they going to appreciate it? Are they going to like it? Is it going to change them? No, not really. So you have to institute some sort of behavioral control. It does not have to be physical, but consequences can be useful. And there are some people that will do research and show that there is no research associated with the use of corporal punishment. That's why I've spent the time up on the soapbox instead of talking, is because the research, depending on what research studies you look at, they're going to differ in whether or not they support corporal punishment or not support corporal punishment. But I'm going to leave it to you. However, I will tell you, can you hear me now? Can you hear me? Can everyone hear me? Let me know if you can hear me. Hello, hello, hello. Okay, must be you, Victory, because my thing is telling me I have sound. Okay, all right. So here's the deal. I will tell you though, if you're gonna spank, be careful not to be out of control, not be full of rage. Here's the deal. Punishment tells your kid what not to do. And sometimes you can spank your kid to the point of being abusive. There are always stories in the newspaper about the parent. In fact, I think there was a lady who made her kid run until the kid dropped dead. What in the world? She punished her kid and made her run a long way on a hot day, and the kid just dropped dead. Punishment can be abusive. Punishment can be emotional. Punishment doesn't tell your child what to do. In fact, what I would say is the better way to train your kids, Once you establish some ground rules of what can't happen, is to spend your time trying to use positive and negative reinforcement to shape the behaviors that are desirable. Rather than tell your kid what not to do, try to encourage them to engage in the things that they should do. If you're going to punish, use it sparingly. Reinforcement is preferable. If you're going to do it very quickly. When I taught my child the word no, I jumped over there as soon as I finished counting 3. I smacked his butt. I did it quickly and I did it consistently. You had to do it every time. Now, here's the funny story I will tell you. My wife liked my 1, 2, 3 thing, and she thought she was going to show it to me about a week after I taught it to her, right? However, she used it wrong. She started the count very slowly. 1, 2, 2.5, and she counted really slowly. And that gives the kid the time to think about making the wrong decision. You have to count quickly. 1, 2, 3. You want them to think with their gut and not with their mind. And then my wife wasn't prepared to spank. Now, here's the deal. When she got to 3, she didn't get up. So I jumped over there and I went and spanked his butt. And she's like, how could you spank him for something that silly? And I told her, well, here's the deal. In order for this to work, we have to spank every time we say we are going to spank. So here's the deal. If you're going to do it, you have to do it quickly and you have to do it consistently, and it has to be aversive. It has to be something the kid doesn't like. But don't do it frequently. Don't punish a lot of things. Figure out what red lines you're going to have. Make sure they're important red lines, and then punish them consistently, aversely, and quickly. And you know what? If you're going to punish, don't apologize for punishing. It's going to confuse the kid. And if you have to apologize for punishing, then you need to question whether or not you are going to punish, right? If you're going to feel bad about doing this, then you shouldn't do it to begin with. And that's a good indicator of whether or not you should punish. And what you're going to find is that most of the time, you're going to feel guilty about punishing your kids. So don't do it. But when you do have your red lines, you must punish aversely, consistently, and quickly. And so, like I said, when I taught my kid 1, 2, 3, I never had to use the count again. And I didn't go there because anytime I went there, I knew I had to spank. So I tried not to use that. All right. And here's the deal. This is the problem for what happened to me as I got older is I was punishing my kid while I was angry. Something would happen and I would immediately go into judge and jury before I even thought about it, especially as your kids get older. Call a timeout. Think about it for a few minutes. That doesn't show weakness. You catch your kid, your 14-year-old doing something, you can say, you know what? We're going to talk about this in a few minutes. We're going to talk about this later today. Give yourself a few minutes and think about things. Calm down because you don't want to be an emotional out of control. So here's the deal. Punishment. Can it be bad? Can it be good? There are some research studies which suggest it does have negative outcomes. A few which will suggest it doesn't. But as a general rule, try to avoid it and use reinforcement if you're going to do it. Don't do it emotionally. Do it in a controlled manner. Do it consistently and make sure that if you do it, you are not sorry about it. Use that as your final hurdle before you engage in aggressive behavior. Okay. Any other questions? Any other questions? I've talked too much. Have any of you changed your mind on punishment since hearing the last 5 minutes of the lecture? Doesn't matter. Oh my goodness. Okay. Goodness me, I've spent way too much time talking about that stuff and I've forgotten to talk about this. Okay. All right. So let's see. You know what? We are out of time, so I'm going to let you read these last couple of things. I will tell you that on your exam, I do not think I have any questions on these last 3 slides on your exam. So I don't think that'll be even necessary to worry about. Okay. So I did have questions on divorce, and I did have questions on punishment on the exam. I do remember that. In fact, I think I have either 2 or 3 questions on divorce. So you may want to focus on that slide. Yes, there is an exam review. It is already in your exam folder. It lists the number of questions, and each bulleted point represents a question, unless it says multiple 2 or 3 questions, then it's 2 or 3 questions. So each topic. What I'm going to do tomorrow, Kaylee, is I'm going to have a live exam review on YouTube where I'm going to go through each of these points that will be on your exam and talk about them specifically so you can know what exactly you should know for the exam. I'm going to do that tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. on YouTube Live, so you can come and ask questions. If you can't make it live, of course, it'll be recorded, and so you can go back over it as a recording. Okay? All right, folks, hey, you take care. Have a great day. Don't forget to do discussion board tonight, homework tomorrow night, exam on Sunday. Take care, and I will see you next week. Bye.